Okay, so good afternoon. I'm Abby, and today Lexi, Pat, and I will be presenting reshoring versus outsourcing for you guys today. So first, I'll explain the difference between the two. So reshoring is when companies return their product to manufacturing from a foreign country back to the home country of where the business's products are actually sold. By doing this, it can strengthen the economy because it creates jobs, lowers the unemployment rate, and helps balance trade deficits. And on the other hand, outsourcing is moving the business operations from a company's home country to a new one. Companies usually do this to reduce costs, labor and manufacturing. Supplies and labor are cheaper outside of the US because other countries do not have the same laws and restrictions that our government has, so it's basically working around the system to get the cheapest products.
All right, and then on this slide, we have a Venn diagram showing different companies that are either reshoring or they're outsourcing currently. So we just put these examples to get you a better idea of like what companies do what and like how it relates to the real world. So for the reshores, we have Toshiba, Goodyear, GE, KitchenAid. So they're companies that were like in Asia or like South America, are typically like the countries that companies will outsource from. So they're bringing their work back to the US, into factories there. And then on the right side are the outsourcers, which are like Nike, IBM, Cisco, and Apple. So like I'm sure you've heard about Nike. They've had some ethical issues, which we'll be talking about later on. But there's like a lot of like different labor laws in countries, or like they could pay workers less. So that's why people or companies will outsource. And then in the middle, I have Walmart. Because Walmart is like one of the biggest companies in the US, like retail wise. Um, so they're like a mixture of reshoring and outsourcing. So they're like outsourced a lot, but now they're making a really big shift to reshore. But a lot of their business processes are done through outsourcing still. Um, and they've also been implementing different programs to encourage other companies that they partner with to reshore, because consumers tend to prefer reshoring versus outsourcing. And then for a cupic, it's a little bit different than like the traditional cupic, since we didn't do a company. We just compared outsourcing to reshoring. For quality for reshoring, it would be higher quality, higher cost. So obviously, cost and quality are related. So the higher the quality, the higher the cost is going to be, because the materials to make something better, it's going to cost more. And then likewise for outsourcing, it's going to be lower quality, lower cost. And then into the process of reshoring, it's less complicated, and there's a smaller supply chain network, because it's more centralized. It's in the US typically, at least with the companies we're talking about. So they're keeping their supply chain like network inside the US. And there's not as much like communication going on with like foreign regulation or working with like foreign companies. So it's just like a lot more smaller. There's not going to be as like much error going on to like inventory and capacity. It improves the efficiency and risk, because there are not as many problems with the smaller supply chain network. And then outsourcing, it's going to be the opposite, because you're you have a bigger network, so there's going to be more risk, lower efficiency, because there's a lot more variables like shipping overseas that can affect it overall, compared to a centralized network with reshoring.
So now I will discuss the issues with both. So reshoring is very expensive. The company needs a lot of investors to invest money into the factory and the equipment. And the wage expense will also increase because now they have to pay American workers at least the minimum wage, if not more. There also needs to be new supplier relationships. The supplies will have to be found locally or shipped into the new factory, which will cost a lot of money, especially if they are coming from farther away. And outsourcing has issues as well. There's a lack of control over production since the production is not in the country. Headquarters is probably in-house, so there is some possibilities for mishaps. There could also be miscommunication or no communication between production and corporate. Along with communication, there can be language barriers that make it difficult to be on the same page. That also goes along with the time zone problems that could hurt the company when it comes to deadlines. The biggest issue we think is the ethical problems that go along with outsourcing. Since the laws and regulations are not the same in other countries, most workers are not treated correctly. Most are overworked, too young, or not getting paid enough and just exploited. A lot of companies ignore this because it's the cheapest option and they're not personally involved, so they don't think it affects them, but this hurts the company culture. And we have seen this occur with many companies, including Nike, and there are pictures of kids in the dirty factories making the shoes that they sell. And the next slide. And I found a survey from different British companies that have reshored for over 3 years now, or that are planning to reshore, and they ranked the main issues that they think come with reshoring, and the top 3 challenges mentioned were potential disruption to production, management time, and quality and consistency from suppliers.
So now, since we addressed the problems with outsourcing, we're going to talk about our recommendations. So we suggest that companies continue to focus on reshoring. Reshoring is like very beneficial because it increases quality. So if you think about in this class, we learned how quality is free. So we think in the long term, it will eventually even itself out because quality is free. So it's easier to, or it's cheaper to fix something before it happens as it is afterwards, and the thing just breaks apart and you have to ship it back. So it's better to increase the quality by manufacturing at home than overseas, and it's going to save you on cost as well. And then it also relates to don't automate, obliterate, because this could also be one of our plans. I know in our first discussion board, we talked about outsourcing and how it affects innovation. So that's like a really big problem with outsourcing. Intellectual properties, companies don't have the same regulations, and also like with ethical concerns. So we related this to don't automate, obliterate as well, which was like one of our next discussion boards, because we could minimize costs. Like that's the major factor when considering reshoring. I think for most companies, it's going to come down to cost. So we could find ways to remove obsolete business processes that we just don't need anymore in the company. We could cut those costs to save on the costs of bringing the materials in the company, all the factories back home. And the key factors to reshoring when you have to consider like moving back to a home country is the cost increase, which I just talked about. Cost is a really big problem. Innovation, I know like I talked about intellectual properties, but you also have to consider there's reasons why companies will like choose different countries. Like maybe they have different things to contribute, different skills, different like technology wise that they might not have at home. So they need to consider that as a factor. Market access as well. Maybe their market is in a different country or different languages they have to adjust for. So they have to account for stuff like that. And then political environment and public sentiment. Like I said, that there's like different ethics in different countries. So if we bring it home, there might be more restrictions, and then we'd have to adjust to those regulations versus the less strict ones foreign. So that's that.
Okay, so now that we went over most of the information that we're going to present to you guys today, we wanted to hear from you guys a little bit on what your thoughts are. So after seeing the pros and cons, what would you choose for your company? I'm going to pull up the participants. If someone just wants to like jump in, raise your hand, I can call on you. Does anyone have any thoughts?
I would just,
Rocker.
I wouldn't outsource. I would not outsource. I would try to keep our production.
Okay, yeah. We're gonna go over like our thoughts in the next slide, but yeah. So now we want to know what were the key factors that help you come to that decision. You can answer this. Someone else could jump in. It's totally up to you guys. Calling you.
I think on the one slide you mentioned how resourcing was like higher cost but also higher quality. So like we've gone over how quality is like free, so like the cost really isn't as important than the low cost of like outsourcing.
Yeah, that's a really good factor. Does anyone else have anyone to add on that one?
I feel like offshoring gives you a little bit more control over your product rather than outsourcing, because it's still you are still doing it, just being done somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next question. So with COVID's global effect on the supply chain industry, how do you believe this will impact outsourcing and reshoring in the future? Any thoughts?
I think it's a really great question. Right now it's kind of difficult to see, just a month ahead of where we're at now. So, of course, in the U.S. and Europe right now, things are not super great with COVID. But other parts of the world, I believe I read that New Zealand is doing really well. So if you have if you have part of your company that's operating out in New Zealand, they may be able to operate at full capacity, whereas the office in New Jersey, it may have to be at a lower capacity. So at least in the near term, I think that offshoring probably is going to help out a little bit by being able to take advantage of areas that are managing the pandemic better than others.
That's a really good point. All right, we're going to move on to our answers to these questions. So for which one we would prefer, as Pat stated before, we would prefer to focus on reshoring. With the way the pandemic is this year, and the way that it looks like it's going to continue in the future, reshoring was stated as something that would really stimulate the economy, and ethically, we just feel like it would be a good idea to like add into that and make sure that we're doing our part to keep the economy running the way that it could be. We also wanted to alleviate some of the pressures from COVID. So as a lot of you guys know, I'm sure a lot of people lost their jobs or got cut back on hours, and unemployment was messy for a while. So we want to alleviate some of those pressures and create more jobs at home. So reshoring and bringing these companies back would help with that. So we would want to bring our companies back. We would also want to avoid the ethical issues that come with outsourcing. So some of those labor laws and stuff like that, we'd want to avoid getting ourselves entrenched in that, because quality is free, and that also goes for ethics. Being ethical in the first place is free, rather than trying to cover up something that we did wrong. So that would cover the first two questions. So those are our key factors there. Moving forward on what we think it would look like based on COVID, some of the articles that we looked into, there was some information stating that the government would be putting some pressure onto larger companies to bring their operations home. As we know, the current presidential administration was a big proponent for bringing companies home. So we could see that more in the future as people lose their jobs. We're going to want to see more jobs here. Some companies also fall back on outsourcing to cut costs as well, though. And I think it was Tyler, as he said, there are some places in the world that are doing better than on COVID. So focusing on those areas would cut costs and also stimulate those parts of the world as well. So we looked into that a lot, and we think that would be very common moving forward. As we talked about before, the automation versus obliterating, a lot of companies are panicking right now if their operations are very global, but they don't have access to anything global. So some companies were saying that they wish they had automated more so that they could more easily control the operations globally. And some were also worried that going digital would cause more problems with things that were not properly automated prior. But at the same time, a lot of companies learning to go digital are falling into patterns of automation rather than innovating. So I think that would be a big concern moving forward.
The newest numbers out today show near.
Okay, and here are some of the sources we used. Thank you for your time, guys. Does anyone have any questions?